Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Troy Clayton, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Air Force is Corporal Kim van der Vloot. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and their families that love and support them. The live stream of this ceremony is made possible by the Return and Services League of Australia and the RSL and Services Club Association. We welcome members who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by visitors to the memorial. If you're able, please stand and join in singing the National Anthem. Thank you. If you're able, you may be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn their loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we'll read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 103,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Private Michael Joseph Hawkins. Michael Hawkins was born in Dublin, Ireland on the 5th of October 1903, the son of Lewis and Rose Hawkins. Raised in the Jewish faith, Hawkins made his way to Australia, where he married Elizabeth McNabb. 3 children were born to the couple, Lenore, Carlotta and Michael, and they lived in North Bondi in Sydney. Hawkins worked as a medical detailer responsible for distribution and promotion of pharmaceutical and health products in his work as a pharmaceutical representative. Michael Hawkins enlisted in the Australian Imperial Force on the 27th of November 1942 at Paddington at the age of 39. Given his knowledge of medical practices, he was soon allocated to the Australian Army Medical Corps. Having spent the early period of his service engaged in training in Sydney and Wagga Wagga, in February 1943, Private Hawkins travelled to Darwin to work in an anti-malaria control unit bound for New Guinea. Embarking on the 10th of March 1943, he arrived at Port Moresby 11 days later. The war against malaria in New Guinea had proved as crucial as the war against the Japanese. In Syria, during June and July of 1941, Australian troops had suffered the Army's first malaria epidemic of the war. 1,400 men succumbed to the disease during the 6-week campaign against Vichy French forces. The medical officers feared the worst in Syria, and the Medical Corps veterans who had served in the Middle East during the First World War remembered the catastrophic epidemic that almost brought the Desert Mounted Corps to a standstill in Damascus. In 1941, epidemic in Syria was contained by the short duration of the campaign, an unusually dry summer, and strict observation of malaria discipline. That included daily doses of quinine, strict measures for avoiding mosquito bites, placing camps in areas away from mosquito breeding sites, limiting nighttime troop movements when possible, and spraying insecticides in areas frequented by troops. Their knowledge, skills, and experience were particularly important in Papua New Guinea, which, then as now, was amongst the regions most prone to malaria on Earth. As the Japanese invasion progressed and the Australian forces were rushed to meet the threat, troop numbers built up rapidly, particularly around Port Moresby, the capital of Papua, where Private Hawkins operated. A series of malaria epidemics erupted almost immediately. The first began in March 1942 as troop numbers around Port Moresby were increasing. Worse epidemics followed during the campaigns at Milne Bay during the second half of 1942 and along the North Papuan coast of Gona, Buna and Sananda at the end of 1942 and early 1943. By the time that Private Hawkins and his comrades arrived, malaria hospitalisation rates were so high that drastic action was necessary. In May 1943, Hawkins was assessed as medically fit to carry out certain duties which require only restricted medical fitness, and he operated for some time in the 11th Division Reception Camp. Malaria control units were involved in moving in with attacking troops. Entomological sections were established, providing advice on the vectors of malaria and other insect-borne diseases. In Australia, an anti-malarial research unit was involved in groundbreaking research and experimentation. In June 1944, Hawkins returned to Australia by plane, arriving in Townsville before making his way to his home state of New South Wales. Late in the year, Hawkins was suffering from his own medical ailments. On the 15th of December 1944, he was discharged, deemed medically unfit for further military service. On the 30th of December, he died at Concord Military Hospital. He was 41 years old. Today, his remains lie buried in the Jewish section of Rookwood Cemetery in Sydney. His name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my left among almost 40,000 Australians who died while serving in the Second World War. His photograph is displayed today, by the pool of reflection. This is but one of many of the stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Private Michael Joseph Hawkins, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope for a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We'll remember them.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub of Gallipoli with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of the director, staff and volunteers, thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today and for your continued support during the memorial's development project. We wish you all a very pleasant evening. Thank you.